There are very few food preservation systems in history that were built for constant movement, long winters, sea voyages, and war. Viking meat preservation was not about comfort or flavour first. It was about survival, reliability, and scalability. What they developed still works today with minimal tools, no electricity, and full control over food security. If you value historical accuracy and practical survival knowledge, this is worth your full attention. Before we go any further, if you care about deep European history, ancient warfare logistics, and the real-world systems that kept societies alive, subscribe to Warpaths of Europe, like this video, and leave a comment with the preservation methods you want us to cover next. Now, let's get straight to the method. This preservation system relied on air, salt, smoke, and time working together. Viking meat preservation was not one single technique, but a layered system designed to remove moisture, inhibit bacteria, and harden protein for long-term storage. The most reliable method combined drying, light salting, and cold smoking. Each step reinforced the next, creating meat that could last months or even years when stored correctly. Fresh meat was never preserved whole. Vikings broke animals down immediately after slaughter to reduce internal moisture and surface bacteria. Large muscles from cattle, sheep, goat, horse and reindeer were cut into long strips or flattened slabs. Fish, especially cod and herring, were split along the spine and opened fully. Surface area mattered because airflow was the primary preservation tool. Today, you can apply this exact logic by breaking meat into thin, uniform cuts. Avoid thick roasts or uneven chunks. The goal is predictable drying, not speed. Salt was used sparingly but deliberately. Vikings did not bury meat in salt the way later societies did. Salt was valuable, traded, and rationed. Instead, they rubbed coarse salt directly onto exposed surfaces or soaked meat briefly in seawater. This drew out surface moisture and slowed bacterial growth without making the meat brittle or overly salty. The salt phase was short. Meat was not left wet. After salting, it was immediately hung to drain and dry. This is critical. Salt alone does not preserve meat long-term unless used in extreme quantities. Drying does the real work. For modern use, coarse sea salt works best. Rub lightly, let it sit for a few hours, then hang or rack the meat in a well-ventilated space. If you live near the coast, a controlled seawater dip, followed by drying mirrors, historical practice closely. Air drying was the backbone of the system. Drying happened outdoors, in sheds, or under longhouse eaves where wind moved constantly. Vikings understood airflow better than temperature control. Cold, dry wind was ideal, but even mild climates worked as long as moisture could escape. Meat was hung on wooden racks, bone hooks, or rope made from plant fibre. It never touched walls or each other. Mould was monitored, not feared. White surface mould was scraped or wiped away. Deep green or black mould meant the piece was discarded. This stage could take weeks. The meat hardened, darkened, and shrank dramatically. At this point, it was already edible, though tough. In modern terms, think of biltong or jerky, but denser and drier. You can replicate this using a ventilated shed, attic, screened porch, or even a well-aired room with steady airflow. Fans help, but natural air movement is better when possible. Cold smoking, added both longevity to the meat and kept insects at bay. It's important to realize that smoking wasn't really about cooking. The Vikings, for example, would use cold smoke that came from smouldering hardwood, peat, or even juniper. That smoke would deposit antimicrobial compounds onto the meat, all while driving away insects and, slowing down oxidation. Smoking always happened after the initial drying phase. By the time the meat ever saw smoke, it was already nice and firm. This step prevented spoilage and, honestly, uneven curing. Smoke sessions could last for days, sometimes spaced out over several weeks. There was absolutely no rush. For practical use today, a cold smoker or even an offset fire with temperatures kept below 30 degrees Celsius will do the trick. You'll want to use hardwoods with low resin content. Be sure to avoid high heat. Remember, the goal here is preservation, not letting the smoke flavor take over everything. Storage conditions actually mattered more than the preservation method itself. Once the meat was preserved, it was kept in dry, dark and cool spaces. The Vikings, for example, used lofts, sealed chests, skin bags and barrels lined with wax or fat. Air circulation was still important, but, moisture had to be avoided at all costs. Preserved meat, back then, was not seen as some sort of ready-to-eat comfort food. It was rationed carefully. Folks would shave off pieces, pound them, or soak them before use. Rehydrating in water, broth or stew brought back flexibility and made it a bit easier to digest. These days, you can store properly dried and smoked meat in breathable cloth bags, wooden boxes, or paper-wrapped bundles inside a cool pantry. Just remember, plastic traps moisture and, honestly, ruins everything. Viking preserved meat was fuel, It was eaten with grains, legumes, fermented dairy, or boiled roots. The protein was dense and powerful, honestly. Small amounts went far. For modern survival or preparedness use, this really does matter. This is not snack food, not by a long shot. This is long-term calorie insurance, One properly preserved animal can support a household through months of scarcity. This method still works because, biology has not changed. Bacteria still need moisture. Insects still avoid smoke. Protein still stabilizes when dried correctly. The Viking system works because it follows natural laws, not technology. If you want a reliable, grid-independent preservation method rooted in European history and battlefield logistics, this is truly one of the best ever developed. It demands discipline, observation, and patience, but it rewards you with food security that modern systems simply cannot match. If this guide added real value to your understanding of European survival history, subscribe to Warpaths of Europe. Share this with fellow historians and survivalists, and leave a comment telling us which historical food systems you want analysed next.